All right, let's start off with the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a bunch of like not insane needs, but just, like I think ones that will make the team a lot better very quickly. Like it's like, oh, it'd be great to address this issue or that issue. For me, Johnny Newton's kind of that guy, right? You obviously lost one of your best interior guys to the Lions. I can't think of a better replacement than Johnny Newton, who, if you've watched any of Illinois' films, like throughout the past couple of years, I mean, he just grabs your attention. Yes, he's undersized, which I think we're talking like a 20 or 30 pound difference of like what you want from a prototypical, nose tackle, three tack, whatever. I don't really care. That dude gets sacks like crazy. He's just incredibly fun to watch, and I think him in a Bengals uni would be sweet. A little different shade of orange, but I think it'll look good in it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. That's definitely one of the point of needs. If you go defense with Cincinnati, I like Murphy obviously as well. I know he's got some off the field concerns, which makes it more likely that he'll be there when they pick. It's a matter of ethics, moral code. Do you take him? Do you deal with it? If he's there, you got to consider it. I really like Fursk as well out of Florida State. This he's just so good with his hands. He reminds me a lot of like how Aaron Donald plays the position. Undersized, he's got like those short, strong arms, and he's so good with making sure that you don't get your hands on the inside of his chest plate. He never gives you a clean blocking slate ever. It makes it hard, very hard to have any movement on him, and he's going to win those one-on-one matchups often. And he can be good in the run and in the pass. If you go offense, what you got to think about, you already have a great offense, right? You lost Mixon, so you got some running back concerns, but you've got Joe Burrow, you've got Jamar Chase. You're gonna probably lose T. Higgins at some point, right? Like that's the major concern. So if you're thinking big picture with this franchise, it's not necessarily like a right now solution, but a guy like Xavier Legette, like you mentioned, the comparison to him and what T. Higgins does for this team, I think he would do very, very well in that same role. And so if T. Higgins is a guy that you don't want to have to pay, you can go get maybe a cheaper version of him and see how he does, right? He might be just like T. Higgins in that role. And Joe Burrow is one of those guys, again, that's going to make the receivers better. So you don't necessarily need to go be aggressive in free agency. You don't have to overpay for receiver two when you can go get another rookie contract receiver two. So that's my offensive side of it.
I dig it. Browns. You have a receiver that you dogged on quite a bit.
Yeah.
Last week. Change of heart, or you just feel like this is the right fit for him?
A little bit of both. I mean, I was hard on Ladd McConkey in our last episode, and I still, again, I don't see him as a first or second round receiver. Like, have some people have him going just way too high, in my opinion. But if he's there and the time's right, I do think he makes sense for this team. They need a consistent, sure-handed slot receiver that can provide a little bit of speed. Obviously, can do all your intermediate routes. You need a third down guy that you can just like trust. No matter whoever's playing quarterback for them, whether it's Watson or somebody else, like you need a third down receiver that is just like, hey, if I get him the ball, like one, he's going to be open, and two, he'll catch it if I get him the ball. And Watson had that in Houston, and he did really well when he had that. He needs that in Cleveland. I think Ladd McConkey's a good fit in that scenario, and I think he provides a little bit of a character change to their culture. Right, there's some culture issues with Deshaun Watson being the lead of your team. Obviously, there's always going to be some kind of floating idea that maybe their team chemistry is not great, and I think McConkey, everybody that he's been around and played with has good things to say about him, and he's got a great underdog story. So I think that's a good guy to bring in and maybe change up a little bit of the karma, maybe perhaps of what people look at your team as.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, the Browns, I don't know where they pick first, but it is nowhere in the first round. So he could still be there for him. And keeping that in mind, I like Will Shipley. We talked about him last week. Obviously, Nick Chubb had one of the craziest knee injuries I think any of us have ever seen. And then, Hunt's getting a little long in the tooth. He's more of an RB2. Let's get some fresh blood in there. Will Shipley, I think, speed, size, he kind of has all the measurables for a successful NFL running back behind one of the best offensive lines in the league. I think they're, right there in the conversation of top one or two offensive lines in the league. I think he'd be very successful and would immediately have a good role within that team. So, running back, I know it's not one we're mentioning super, super quickly, but, Mark, you had me thinking about Shipley and why he was so freaking low on some of these draft boards. And like, that could be a great fit for him. Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do this, and I don't think it's a possibility unless they move up. But I think Jackson Powers Johnson's a sweet fit for him for Baltimore. Just again, his versatility, right, on the interior, like his ability to move to that guard slot if you need him to. He just adds depth at that center spot if you need him there. I think that he fits the Baltimore mold of what they're going to try to do. You got to keep in mind what they did in the offseason, right? Because a lot of times with teams, and this is just a general synopsis of what we typically see in these drafts. What these teams do in the offseason goes hand in hand with their plan in the draft. And sometimes people in the media don't piece those two things together. They went and got Derrick Henry. They have a running quarterback like Lamar Jackson. Let's not try to think or overthink the situation. They're going to try to run the football. So they're going to do something in this draft that's going to help them do that. And I don't think there's many better options than him. If you want to get better as a running game, he's one of the first guys on the list that John or anybody else is going to mention.
Yeah, so I do think addressing their interior offensive line is a need. Another need that people I feel like aren't talking about as much, but there is one, is that edge rusher. How about Darius Robinson, right? Massive, high motor, I think fits that culture really well, kind of a gritty player. He's another guy that I could see going to Detroit as well. I think that's potentially a good defensive fit. And then another thing that people maybe are forgetting a little bit too is I think they're losing Odell Beckham this year, aren't they?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
he signed a 1 year.
Really much of their.
He wasn't, but
towards the end there.
We saw what having a receiving core, like a truly competent receiving core with more than one competent receivers, did for Lamar Jackson's game this last season. I don't think they're going to want to lose that. So another one, and one that we haven't mentioned, and will probably be a trade up if you were to go get him. But Brian Thomas, I feel like opposite Zay Flowers would just be a sick 1-2 punch. But I think Thomas would be instantly successful. I mean, him, Flowers, Andrews, that's a crazy combination. Maybe they don't feel the same kind of pressure because of the fact that they have two really good tight ends. So I don't know there, but just one that popped in my head is like, nobody's saying receivers in need, but I think that's something they're going to try to protect, is just how good of a receiving core they had and what that did for Lamar Jackson as a player. Yeah. So, definitely both sides of that would benefit from, having another kind of number one caliber receiver headed to Baltimore. Last one is the Steelers, which I don't know if you did this on purpose or not, but you have another guy that you think would be successful with the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give my DeJean take again, because it was for DeJean. Okay. When I was thinking of Cooper DeJean, it was like, okay, Steelers and Packers are like the two. Like, I could just see him in those uniforms. I mean, come on, how similar is Pittsburgh's uniform to Iowa's, like the black and gold? Right. And it would just work, So that's my simple answer. I also had Jackson Powers Johnson here. John screwed me and had back to back, but it is what it is. And I really like this prospect. And Steelers mold, their identity is very similar, I think, to the Ravens. That's why it's one of the best rivalries in the league. Might as well have them have the same best fit guy. Let's see who gets them.
Yeah. Another guy that potentially might be a good fit, TJ Tampa. I mean, they just know how to develop secondary players. And so that was the guy on my list for the Steelers that, is within the realm of possibility for them to grab where they're picking in the draft.
Tomlin loves a DB project, Dude, I mean,
it's
it worked out with Joey Porter Jr. last year. Do they get hungry and try to go get another one? Do they try to address that offense? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of different routes, but
yeah, I mean, you could go receiver here too. Like, obviously,
yeah, so for sure you could, dude.
You could go anywhere. I mean, they have a lot of problems they need to address. But the weird part is that they still feel like they're going to be a good competitive team, because that's what Tomlin always says.
They have Fields and Russell Wilson. Like, that is just like a bizarre combination of talent, but they could be special if they utilize those guys the right way. And they might utilize both of them, Yeah. I would.